The rain started at 5:15. Emily Harlow noticed it first through the kitchen window, a gray curtain drawing itself across the manicured lawn, across the stone fountain that had never once been turned on since she moved into this house 5 years ago. She had always thought that was strange. A fountain no one ever ran. A garden no one ever sat in. A house full of expensive things that no one touched. She was folding napkins when she heard the heels on the marble floor. She had learned to recognize the sound years ago. It was slower than her husband's stride, more deliberate, each step placed with a precision that communicated, before a single word was spoken, that the person walking toward you had already decided something. Margaret Whitfield moved through rooms like a verdict. Emily, good evening, Margaret. She did not look up from the napkins. She had learned that too, that looking up too quickly, too eagerly, could be read as weakness, but looking up too slowly could be read as insolence. The correct expression was somewhere in between, and she had spent 5 years trying to calibrate it. I need to speak with you. Of course. Margaret sat at the head of the table. She was 71 years old, and looked 60, and dressed like a woman who knew it. Her white hair was set, her posture was flawless, and her hands, resting on the table, were steady in a way that made Emily's folding hands feel very unsteady. Thomas and I have been speaking, Margaret began. Thomas was Emily's husband. He was 43 and worked in commercial real estate, and had the particular quality of men who are born into wealth and then spend their lives mistaking that accident for personal achievement. Emily had loved him once. She was no longer sure when she had stopped. We have reached a conclusion, Margaret said. Emily set down the napkin. She looked at her mother-in-law. A conclusion. The physician's report was quite clear. The specialist agreed. The damage from the miscarriage was the technical language, doesn't matter. What matters is the outcome. Margaret folded her own hands. There will not be children. The word will not landed differently from cannot. Emily noticed that. You've known this for 3 months, Emily said quietly. We've known this. We have been considering it for 3 months. Margaret's tone was not cruel. That was the remarkable thing about it. It was the tone of someone who believed they were simply being realistic. Thomas requires children. The Whitfield estate, the succession of the business, these are not small matters. Thomas is not getting younger. Neither am I. No. Margaret paused. You are not. There was a suitcase in the hallway. Emily had not noticed it when she came down from upstairs. She noticed it now, a single bag, her own, the worn brown one she'd brought from her mother's house when she first married. Someone had already packed it. She stared at it for a long moment. Where is Thomas? He has a dinner. He thought it would be easier this way. Easier. He had let his mother do this so that he wouldn't have to. 5 years, and the last act of their marriage was that he'd arranged to be at a dinner. I want to hear him say it. Her voice was still level. She was proud of that, later. Emily, I want to hear Thomas say it. Margaret's expression shifted not to guilt, but to something colder. A faint impatience, as though a subordinate had begun asking questions beyond their position. This is not a negotiation. She stood. The car will take you wherever you need to go tonight. We will have the formal paperwork drawn up by the end of the week. The terms will be fair. Fair. Emily looked at her suitcase. She looked at the table she had set, the napkins she had folded, the kitchen through the doorway, where dinner she had half prepared was sitting on the counter. She looked at the fountain through the window, running now because the rain was running through it. Finally, for the first time, she walked to the hallway. She picked up her suitcase. Margaret said one more thing from behind her. And it was the kind of sentence that enters the body differently than the ear not heard so much as absorbed, the way a bruise forms. You simply have no value here, Emily. I'm sorry, but that is the truth. The front door was heavy. It closed behind her with a sound that was final, without being dramatic, the sound of a chapter, ending not with a thunderclap, but with a period. The rain was cold. She stood on the stone steps and realized she didn't know where she was going. She had no family in this city. Her mother was 3 states away in a small house in Vermont. with bad insulation and a bad back, and her own set of careful, accumulated griefs. She had friends, had friends, but they had been Thomas's friends' wives first, and those friendships had the texture of things that are borrowed and must eventually be returned. She stood in the rain. Her phone was in her coat pocket. It was dry. She took it out and looked at it and could not think of a single number to call. That was when the black car slowed. It was a Volvo dark, understated, the kind of car bought by someone who could afford something louder but hadn't. It stopped at the curb directly in front of her. The window came down. In the back seat, partially visible through the rain-streaked glass, was a child, a girl. She looked to be around 5 or 6, with brown hair pulled into 2 uneven braids. And she was looking at Emily with the particular unfiltered attention that children give to things adults have learned to look away from. The front passenger door opened. A man got out. He was tall, not remarkably so, but tall enough that he seemed to take up more of the wet air than the space around him. He was wearing a dark overcoat, open at the collar. He looked to be in his early 40s, the kind of face that had been handsome without effort, and was now handsome with a layer of something heavier over it. He had the posture of someone accustomed to walking into rooms and having them rearrange themselves accordingly. He stood a few feet from her and looked at her the way you look at a problem you are deciding whether to engage with. "Are you all right?" he asked. The question was straightforward. Not performatively sympathetic. Not careful. Just direct, the way you'd ask a colleague. "I'm fine," Emily said, which was not true, but which she said automatically, because that was what years of living in that house had trained her to say. The man glanced at her suitcase. He glanced at the door she'd come out of. He looked back at her. "My daughter," he said, "has been asking me for the last 5 minutes to stop the car." Emily looked at the girl in the back seat, who was still watching her with that complete, uncomplicated attention. She raised one small hand and waved. A small, serious wave. Emily waved back, without entirely meaning to. "She doesn't usually ask me to stop for things," the man said. He paused. Then, "I'm going to say something, and I want you to understand, it's not charity. I don't do charity. I do practical solutions." Emily waited. "You need somewhere to stay tonight. I have more rooms than anyone uses. My daughter seems to have decided something that I am not in a position to argue with." He put his hands in his pockets. "My name is Daniel Ashworth. I run a company downtown. I have a cook, a housekeeper, and a security system. You would be safe." She stared at him. "You're a stranger," she said. "Yes. I don't know anything about you." "No." He paused. "Although you can look up the company if you have your phone. Ashworth Capital. I'm the second result. The first result is a magazine profile from 3 years ago that makes me sound more interesting than I am." She almost laughed. The little girl in the car had pressed her face to the glass now, still watching. She had the expression of someone who had already decided the outcome and was simply waiting for the adults to catch up. "Your daughter," Emily said. "What's her name?" "Lily." "Does Lily do this often? Adopt strangers?" For the first time, something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but a fold near the corner of his mouth. "No," he said. "She doesn't." The rain was getting heavier. Emily's coat was not waterproof. She could feel the cold seeping into her shoulders. She thought about calling her mother. She thought about a hotel, and the credit card that was technically joint, and whether using it tonight would be complicated. She thought about the napkins she'd been folding when the heels started coming down the hall. She looked at Lily, still pressed to the glass, watching. She picked up her suitcase. "All right," she said. The back door opened before she reached it. Lily moved over to make room, quick and deliberate. And when Emily sat down and the door closed, the little girl looked at her with absolute seriousness and said, "You looked cold." "I was," Emily said. Lily nodded, satisfied. Daniel got in the front. He didn't say anything else. The car pulled away from the curb, from the Whitfield house, from the fountain that was finally, uselessly running in the rain. The Ashworth house was in the older part of the city, the neighborhood where the trees were large enough to be called historic. and the houses were set back from the road behind hedges rather than walls. It was a federal-style house, 4 stories, white, with black shutters and a front door painted the kind of deep navy that was almost black. Inside, high ceilings, pale wood floors, a staircase that turned once, unhurried. It was spotless. It was also, Emily understood immediately, the home of people who lived in it but did not inhabit it. The surfaces were clear because they were always kept clear. The cushions were straight because they were straightened each morning. The kitchen, when she walked through it, was equipped with everything and showed evidence of nothing: no dish drying beside the sink, no handwritten list on the refrigerator, no coffee ring on the counter. A woman appeared, 50s, efficient, light brown hair pulled back. "This is Mrs. Caldwell," Daniel said. "She runs the house." Mrs. Caldwell looked at Emily with the professional neutrality of someone who had learned not to ask questions about the situations her employer created. "I'll prepare the guest room on the 2nd floor," she said. "Thank you," Emily said. Lily had not let go of Emily's sleeve since they'd gotten out of the car. She walked beside her now through the kitchen, through the hallway, up the first few stairs, apparently intending to accompany her indefinitely. "Lily," Daniel said from the hallway. His voice wasn't harsh. It was simply final. Lily stopped. She looked at Emily. She looked at her father. "Tomorrow," she said, which was not quite a question and not quite a statement, but contained the assumption that there would be a tomorrow in which this arrangement continued. "Tomorrow," Emily said. Lily descended the stairs with the specific gravity of a child who has said what she needed to say and can now afford to be patient. Daniel stood in the hallway until Lily had gone to her room. Then he looked up at Emily on the stairs. "The rules are simple," he said. "This house has a schedule. Lily's routine doesn't change. You're not here in any official capacity. I'm not asking you to work or to take care of anything. You're a guest, for as long as you need to be." A pause. "We don't involve ourselves in each other's lives." Emily nodded. "I understand. Good night, Miss Harlow." He knew her name. She hadn't given it to him. She had no idea how he knew it, and she was too tired to ask. She went upstairs. The guest room was large and impersonal and warm. The bed had been turned down. A towel was folded at the foot of it. She sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall for a long time. Then she unpacked nothing. She lay down in her clothes. She was asleep within minutes. She woke at 6:30 to the smell of coffee and the sound of a child singing, very softly, somewhere in the house. In the weeks that followed, Emily learned the architecture of their silence. Daniel left every morning at 7:45. He returned between 6 and 7 in the evening. He ate dinner with Lily and, increasingly, with Emily. Although these dinners were not, by most definitions, social occasions. They were functional. Plates were passed. Brief reports were made about the day. Lily talked, which helped. Without Lily, Emily wasn't sure they would have spoken at all. She had not been asked to do anything in the house. Mrs. Caldwell managed everything with a smooth competence that made assistance feel like intrusion. But Emily was not a person who could sit still in someone else's space without finding something to contribute to it. It wasn't helpfulness. Exactly, it was the anxiety of uselessness, the need to justify her presence with something that could be pointed to and held. She started cooking, not replacing Mrs. Caldwell. The woman had Tuesdays and Thursdays off, and on those evenings the expectation had been takeout or the prepared meals in the refrigerator. Emily started cooking those nights. Simple things at first. Soup, roasted chicken, a pasta that Lily requested 3 separate times. She started leaving books in different places. She had bought a few at the used shop on Clement Street, nothing expensive, and she found herself reading in the kitchen in the mornings and in the sitting room in the evenings. And gradually the rooms began to feel like rooms that someone lived in, rather than rooms that were simply maintained. Lily noticed everything. Lily noticed when Emily left a flower from the garden on the kitchen table. She noticed when Emily remembered that she liked her toast cut diagonally. She noticed when Emily was sad, which happened more often than Emily would have liked, usually in the afternoon, in a quiet doorway moment, when the full weight of what had happened caught up to her. And on those occasions, Lily would appear with a book or a drawing, or simply herself, sitting nearby, saying nothing, which was, it turned out, exactly the right thing. Daniel noticed too. He was careful not to show it. 6 weeks after Emily moved in, Lily asked her about the mark on her wrist. It was a small scar, old, white, from a burn that had happened when she was younger, not anything significant. But Lily saw it while Emily was washing dishes and looked at it with the directness children apply to the things adults have learned to gloss over. "Does it hurt?" Lily asked. "Not anymore," Emily said. "My mom has a scar," Lily said. She was quiet for a moment. She had one on her shoulder. From when she was little, Emily kept her hands in the water. "What was she like?" she asked. She had not planned to ask. She wasn't sure it was the right thing to ask, but Lily seemed to want to talk about her, in the careful, circling way children approach things that are big. "Loud," Lily said, and then smiled. Because clearly, this was a good memory. She laughed really loud. Dad used to pretend it bothered him. A pause. It didn't bother him. "No," Emily agreed. "He doesn't laugh anymore," Lily said. "He used to." Emily dried her hands. That evening, after Lily was in bed, Emily came downstairs to find Daniel sitting in the study with a glass of something amber on the side table, untouched, a folder of papers open in his lap that he wasn't reading. She stood in the doorway. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said. He looked up. His expression moved through several things: surprise, the impulse to close the conversation. Something older and harder to name. "Thank you," he said. She almost left. Then, "Lily talks about her. I know she does. She has good memories." "Yes." Something shifted in his jaw. Claire was remarkable. And then she was gone. And I spent the first year trying to figure out how the house still stood up. How anything still worked. He picked up the glass, put it down again. "I'm sure that sounds dramatic." "It doesn't," Emily said. He looked at her with a directness that was different from his usual assessment, less strategic, more unguarded. "You lost something too," he said. It was not a question. She wasn't sure how he knew. Perhaps he had simply looked at her the way she had looked at him and understood that grief has a particular posture, a way of holding the body slightly inward, like a door that's been pushed closed from the inside. "A pregnancy," she said. 2 years ago. There were complications. After that, the doctors said," she stopped. "The house I was in. They decided what that meant about me." The study was quiet. Rain again, or still, against the windows. "It means nothing about you," Daniel said. It was not a comfort he offered, not soft or decorated. It was stated the way he stated things. As fact. She nodded. She said goodnight. She went to bed and stared at the ceiling, and found that something in her chest was, very slightly, less compressed than it had been the night before. Spring arrived. The way spring arrives in that part of the country, slowly, then all at once. The trees going from bare to fully decided in what felt like a single weekend. Emily planted things in the side garden that had been nothing but ivy and neglect. Mrs. Caldwell watched this development with cautious approval. Lily helped. Or rather, Lily was present during the planting and contributed opinions about where things should go, which Emily accepted with complete seriousness. The house changed. It was difficult to isolate exactly which moments constituted the change, because no single thing was responsible. It was the cumulative weight of small decisions, the music Emily sometimes played in the kitchen, the way Lily had begun bringing her drawings downstairs to finish at the kitchen table rather than her room, the habit that had developed of Sunday breakfast taking longer than it used to, not through any orchestrated effort but simply because no one got up to leave. Daniel watched all of this with the careful attention of a man who has learned to be suspicious of good things. He came home one Tuesday evening in March to find Emily in the kitchen and Lily on the counter beside her, sitting on the counter, which he was quite certain was not a habit he had approved, both of them attempting to make pasta from scratch, which had gone approximately sideways. There was flour on the counter, and flour on Lily's forehead, and flour on the sleeve of Emily's shirt. And Lily was laughing at something Emily had just said in the specific, whole-body way she used to laugh before. Daniel stood in the doorway. Neither of them heard him. He watched his daughter laugh. He went upstairs and changed his shirt, and came back down, and said nothing about ate the pasta, which was irregular and slightly uneven, but tasted, somehow, better than anything Mrs. Caldwell had made in months. He said so, which surprised all three of them. Then in April, Lily had a fever. It came on fast, the way fevers in children do fine at dinner, burning by 9 o'clock. Emily was still awake when she heard Lily call out. She went before Mrs. Caldwell arrived, before Daniel's door opened, and she sat on the edge of Lily's bed and put her hand on the child's forehead and felt the heat of it, and felt, distantly, the particular shape of terror that belongs to loving something small and feverish. "It's okay," she said. "I'm here." "My head hurts," Lily said. "I know. We're going to fix that." She got the thermometer. Got the right dose of children's medication from the cabinet where Mrs. Caldwell kept it labeled. Got a cool cloth. Sat on the edge of the bed and stayed there. Daniel appeared in the doorway around 10:30. He stood and watched Emily wring out the cloth and press it gently to Lily's forehead and talk to her in a low, continuous voice about nothing in particular, the garden, what they would plant next, whether Lily thought the tomatoes would come in before summer or after, the voice being the point, not the content, the voice being the thing that told the child's nervous system. "You are not alone in this. You are not alone." He watched for a long time. When Lily finally fell asleep, Emily came out into the hallway and found him still there. "She's okay," Emily said, quietly. He nodded. He said nothing, but he was looking at her the way you look at something you had categorized and then discover does not fit the category. The woman arrived on a Wednesday morning, while Daniel was at work and Lily was at school. Emily was in the garden when she heard the doorbell. Mrs. Caldwell was out. And so Emily answered it, and found on the step a woman she recognized immediately. Not from any prior meeting, but from the architecture of her expression. The curated clothing, the practiced position of the chin, the smile that was not for you. Vivienne Whitfield was Thomas's older sister. She was 49, managed their father's charitable foundations, and had always looked at Emily the way you look at something that has been placed in the wrong room. Behind her stood a man Emily didn't know, early 30s, pressed shirt, holding a folder. "Emily." Vivienne's voice was warm in the precise amount that the warmth could be withdrawn without leaving a mark. "You're looking well." "Vivienne, I hope we're not interrupting." She glanced around the exterior of the house with the particular expression of someone locating and cataloging information. "I'd heard you were staying here. Then you knew you weren't interrupting a surprise." Vivienne's smile adjusted. "I won't stay long. Thomas wanted me to reach out to you personally, not through the lawyers." She held out the folder. "The settlement terms have been revised." He felt the original offer was not quite appropriate, given your years together. "He'd like you to review the new terms." Emily did not take the folder. He should have thought about what was appropriate before he sent his mother to deliver the news while he had dinner. "Thomas has always handled confrontation poorly. You know this." "I do." Emily looked at Vivienne steadily. "Which is why I'm not interested in accepting anything from someone who couldn't confront me himself." The man behind Vivienne made a small movement, reaching for the folder, perhaps, or preparing to say something. "Also," Emily said, "I want you to know whatever you came here to see or to determine about my situation. I hope you find it satisfying, because this is the only time I'll answer this door for you." There was a silence. Vivienne's expression settled into something more honest, harder, cooler, without the performance of warmth. "Emily, you are 41 years old, and living in the house of a man you have known for 2 months. I say this, not unkindly. You should think about your position." "My position," Emily said, "is the one I chose." She closed the door. She stood in the hallway for a moment, her hand still on the handle, and noticed that her hand was not shaking. That was new. 5 years of shaking hands, and now stillness. She went back to the garden. She picked up her trowel. She planted the rest of the marigolds. She found out gradually, the way you find out about things that have been done for you without announcement. The first sign was the lawyer. She had retained one, finally, a woman named Ruth Calloway. recommended by a neighbor of Daniel's. And when Emily sat down for the first meeting and mentioned the Whitfield name, Ruth had said, "Yes, I'm aware of the situation. Mr. Ashworth briefed me." Emily had looked at her. Ruth, to her credit, did not look embarrassed. "He contacted my office 3 weeks ago. He didn't ask me to take any particular position, he just wanted to make sure you had representation that wasn't connected to anyone in that family's network. He did that without telling me," Emily said. "Yes." She said nothing else to Ruth about it that day. She drove home and found Lily in the driveway, having a conversation with Mrs. Caldwell about whether dandelions counted as flowers, and Emily walked past them both into the kitchen and stood at the counter for a while. The second sign came from the neighbor across the street, an older man named George Patton, who had lived there for 30 years, and who told Emily, in the easy way of someone sharing information he assumed she already had, that a few weeks ago he'd seen a car sitting outside the house, not their block, across on the wider road for several hours, and that he'd mentioned it to Daniel, and Daniel had made a call, and the car hadn't come back. She didn't confront Daniel about it. She watched him, instead, over the next few dinners. He sat across the table and talked to Lily about her school project on weather systems and ate without looking at Emily. And she thought, this is what it looks like when someone protects you without requiring your gratitude for it. It was a foreign concept. She had lived, for 5 years, in a house where every courtesy was an invoice. Lily, at dinner one of those evenings, looked up from her plate without preamble and said, "Dad doesn't like it when people are mean to us." Daniel said, "Lily, I'm just explaining," Lily said, with great dignity. "I know," Emily said. She looked across the table. Daniel was not looking at her. "I know he doesn't." May. Emily woke at 2 in the morning and lay in the dark and understood, with the clarity that only comes at that hour, that she was in love with this house. Not with Daniel, she was careful, in the dark, to be precise about this. She was in love with the version of herself that existed in this house. She was in love with the mornings when Lily came down before breakfast and showed her the drawing she'd made the night before. She was in love with the garden, which was coming in thick and green and improbable. She was in love with the feeling of being, for the first time in years, someone whose presence was not subtracted from, and that was the problem. She sat up. She had been here before, not here, not in this house, but in this emotional position, attached to something that was not hers, dependent on something she had not built and could not control. She knew what happened to that. She knew the exact weight of a door closing behind her. The next morning she told Daniel she was thinking of finding her own apartment. She told him over breakfast, with Lily at school, and she watched his face go through something she couldn't entirely read. A brief, controlled compression, the expression of a man absorbing information he is not prepared for. "If that's what you want," he said. "It's practical," she said. "I've been here long enough to it's time I established something for myself." "You've been generous." "I don't want to." She stopped. "I don't want to become a fixture. Something you have to work around." He was quiet for a moment. "You're not something anyone has to work around. You said when I came here that we wouldn't involve ourselves in each other's lives." "I said a lot of things in the driveway in the rain," he said. He picked up his coffee. Some of them were accurate. She almost pushed further. Instead, she said nothing, and the conversation ended. And she drove to look at an apartment on Hartwell Street that was fine and clean and completely, thoroughly empty. She didn't take it. She came home, she had started calling it that. Silently, in the vocabulary of her own head, and Lily was back from school and showed her the grade on her weather systems project, which was excellent, and they celebrated with the good cookies from the high shelf, and Emily sat on the kitchen counter, while Lily stood on a stool, and they ate cookies and talked about clouds, and she thought, "Here, this is the thing I am afraid of losing." Then the call came. It was Vivienne again, not in person this time, by phone. And this time, without the warmth, without the practiced register. She said Thomas had retained a lawyer who was challenging the terms of the original separation, attempting to recapture assets that Emily was entitled to under the marriage agreement. She said it was not personal, but that Emily should understand the family's position, Emily sat on the edge of the bed and listened. When it was over, she sat there for a long time. She heard Lily in the hallway outside, and then a knock on the door, not Lily's knock, which was 3 quick ones, but a single, slower knock. "Come in," she said. Daniel stood in the doorway. He had clearly been on his way somewhere, still in his work shirt, jacket over his arm. He looked at her. "I heard it ring," he said. "I heard your voice change." She told him what Vivienne had said. He listened without interrupting. This, she had noticed, was a habit of his. He gave silence the same respect most people give to speech. When she finished, he said, "Ruth Calloway is very good. This won't be a problem for you." "That's not." She stopped. "That's not actually what I know," he said. She looked at him. "I know it's not about the legal part," he said, more quietly. "I know what it's like when someone from your old life calls, and for a minute you feel like you're back in it. Like no time has passed." He was looking at the floor, then at her. "Like you haven't built anything." She said nothing. "You've built something," he said. "Here. Whether you stay or go. You've built it." June. Daniel found her in the garden on a Saturday morning, early, when the light was still low and the air still had the cool of night in it. She was pulling up the last of a border that hadn't taken, her hands in the dirt, her hair up. He crouched beside her. She didn't look up. "Lily told me about the apartment on Hartwell Street," he said. "She wasn't supposed to tell you about that. She tells me things she thinks I should know, but am too slow to figure out myself." A pause. She is usually correct about which things those are. Emily sat back on her heels. She looked at her muddy gloves. "Daniel," she said. "I know what I said when you came here," he said. "I know what I said about not involving ourselves in each other's lives. I want you to know that I said that because I needed to say it. Not because it was true. It stopped being true after about 3 weeks." She looked at him. "You are not a replacement," he said. "I want to say that before anything else. You are not someone I've installed here because the shape of what I had was gone. What I had is gone. That's true. And you are something entirely different, something I didn't plan for and didn't know how to categorize, and still, probably, don't have the right language for. Daniel, let me say this." She was quiet. "Lily calls you my Emily at school." He said it plainly, without decoration. "I found out from her teacher 3 weeks ago, not my dad's friend Emily. My Emily. I thought about telling her to stop." A pause. "I didn't." The garden was very still. "I don't know what this is," Daniel said. "I'm not asking for it to be named. I'm asking you not to leave because you're afraid of it." "I'm afraid of losing it," she said. "There's a difference." "There is." He looked at her steadily. "But leaving to avoid losing something is not protection. It's just an earlier version of the same loss." She looked at her hands. She thought about the fountain in the Whitfield garden, beautiful and unused. She thought about her suitcase, already packed by someone else. She thought about Lily's small, serious wave through the rain-streaked window. "I can't promise you I won't be afraid," she said. "I know. I can't promise you I won't sometimes be, Emily." He said it the way people say names when the name alone is the whole sentence. "I'm not asking for promises. I have a daughter who calls you my Emily, and a garden that's growing for the first time in 4 years, and a kitchen that smells like something, finally." He looked away, and then back. "I'm asking you to stay." She looked at him for a long time. She pulled off one of her gloves. She put her hand on the ground between them, not reaching for him, not dramatic. Just placing her hand on the ground, the way you place something down when you've been carrying it long enough. He put his hand next to hers. That was all. July came in warm and unhurried. The tomatoes came in before summer ended, which Lily had predicted, and which Emily had doubted, and which both of them spent an entire morning acknowledging with more satisfaction than the tomatoes themselves warranted. They were good tomatoes. They were also, in that particular way that ordinary things become extraordinary, the best tomatoes Emily had ever eaten. She stayed, not in any announced way, not with paperwork or formal declaration. She simply did not go to the apartment on Hartwell Street. Her things, which had never been fully unpacked, were eventually fully unpacked. Mrs. Caldwell began referring to the guest room as Emily's room, and then, gradually, as simply Emily's, which was the only thing that needed to change for the whole house to feel different. The legal matter with the Whitfields resolved itself in September, efficiently and without drama. The way such things do when the right people are handling them. Ruth Calloway was, as Daniel had said, very good. Emily received what was fair, and not one thing more, which was all she had wanted. She did not feel, at the end of it, victorious. She felt relieved, the way you feel when a noise that's been in the background for so long, you'd stopped consciously hearing it finally stops. She began working again. Not in the field she'd been in before. She had been in corporate communications, a job she'd been good at and not particularly attached to, but at a small nonprofit that needed someone organized and reliable and good with language. It was not glamorous. It was, she discovered, meaningful in the way that work is meaningful when you are not also using it to perform a version of yourself for someone else's approval. Lily turned 7 in October. There was a party, not large, just 6 children from school, and a cake that Emily baked and that Lily had requested specifically without any input from Mrs. Caldwell, which was the highest compliment she had in her power to give. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway, while Emily piped frosting, and watched in the way he watched things, attentively, without intrusion, storing information the way a person stores things they intend to return to. After the party, after the children had gone home and Lily had been put to bed, Daniel and Emily sat on the back porch with tea and the last of the cake and the warm October evening, which had that particular quality of October evenings where the dark comes faster than expected. She asked me something last week, Daniel said. Emily waited. She asked if we were a family. What did you say? He turned his cup in his hands. I told her I didn't know the right word for it yet. That we were figuring it out. He looked at her. She said that was fine. She said families don't all look the same. She's 7. She's very 7. Emily smiled. Somewhere inside, through the screen door, they could hear the particular quality of silence that means a child is asleep, a fullness to the quiet, a house settling around something it's holding. She's right, though, Emily said. Yes, Daniel said. She usually is. He didn't say anything else for a while. Neither did she. The October dark came on around them, and the garden held its shapes in the last of the light, the rows she'd planted, the borders that had taken, and the ones that hadn't, the evidence of a season of trying. After a while, Daniel reached across and put his hand on hers. Not dramatically, not with ceremony. The way you put your hand over something you mean to keep. She turned her hand over so her palm met his. They sat until it was fully dark and then a while longer. Inside, later, Lily's door was open an inch. On the desk beside her bed, her sketchbook lay open to a drawing she had made the night before, 4 figures, rendered in the specific, abstract style of 7-year-old sincerity, where the proportions were uncertain but the meaning was not. One tall figure with dark hair, one figure, smaller, whose hair she'd colored yellow, one with braids, and in the middle, another figure, with a green shirt and a hand extended or raised. It was difficult to tell, and the name written beneath it, in careful, uneven letters. Emily, not at the edge of the drawing, not beside it, or behind it, or hovering at the perimeter. In the middle, where families put the things they've decided to keep. Families are not found. They are chosen, slowly, in the rain, and in the garden, and in the quiet of Tuesday evenings, and in the specific way someone sits with you when you are afraid without asking you to stop being afraid. They are chosen every morning when you could leave and don't. They are the hand on the table, the name in the picture, the door that stays open,